Hey everyone, you should be able to hear me. You'll be able to see me here in just a couple of seconds, but I wanted to welcome you all. And as usual, we're going to go live here at the top of the hour, probably give a minute or two. We have lots of people rolling in and we want to make sure that we have seats for everybody this time. So we don't want anyone to miss it. But I've been looking at the chats and trying to say hello to all of you. If I've missed a state or a group, please let me know. That's the danger in trying to say hello to everybody when they roll in as fast. But please know that how much we appreciate your support and welcome to the webinar. If this is your first webinar with us, please know that we're delighted that you're here. If this is a webinar, if it's not the first, if you've been with our webinars, then welcome back. We thank you for coming and we hope you brought some friends. So, again, welcome everyone, and we are really happy to be able to continue this series of webinars. Again, as I just said, we're going to probably give it just another minute before I introduce my guests and let them really talk with you about some very exciting things and some really good information that I think you'll all very much appreciate. Before we get started, though, I have been sharing with you on chat, and we have been putting out on Twitter and some social media and in our newsletter. Immediately following today's webinar, we are going to host a live Twitter chat, and we're going to be using the hashtag #RealFamilyEngagement. Our friends from Klein are going to stay with us for a while. If there's any questions from the field, or if we just want to continue the conversation and pose some questions, we'll continue to do that. So remember, if you have time and you can join us, right at the end of the webinar, please go to Twitter and use, anytime you want to participate, just use the hashtag #RealFamilyEngagement. Going to give it just about a minute or so. Really thrilled that our friends from Klein ISD are here, the Klein School District in Texas. They are doing some really great things, and we met each other through some previous work, and when I started to hear and see the kind of work that Klein was doing, I thought they would be a wonderful guest. I also wanted to make sure that as we continue this webinar series, that we also have educators and people in the field talking about their experiences. I think it's great for, I love sharing information with you, and I will continue to do that as long as I have a breath in me. But I also know that we as educators like to hear from other educators as well. And so when we got that idea, it was a no-brainer to ask Klein. And so you're going to meet my friend Maria in a minute, but we asked Maria to join us, and then we were really doubly enthusiastic when Dr. Jenny McGown, the superintendent of the Klein School District, is going to join us as well. So we were just thrilled beyond belief to have the superintendent talk with us about her views and about what she sees happening in Klein as well. Looks like the rolling in has slowed down a little bit, so why don't we go ahead and get officially started. If my friends from Klein want to chime in with your video and audio button, we'll meet you. There's Maria. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to two new friends, really. I met Maria through some of the work that we've been doing recently since the pandemic, and through Maria met Dr. McGown. But I'm not gonna steal their thunder. I want Ovalle-Lopez, who is a parent involvement coordinator director, one of the people in Klein that is making this happen, and of course Dr. Jenny McGown, who is the superintendent of the Klein ISD school system. She became superintendent last summer. She's a former chief learning officer, deputy superintendent. So she has a tremendous perspective that she'll bring to us today as well. So I don't want to steal too much of their time. They will tell you more about themselves. They'll tell you more about their school district, and then get into some of the meat of the matter today, and that is understanding what's working well and what they're working on in Klein ISD. So Maria, Dr. McGowan, welcome, and I will turn the show over to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Constantino. We're so excited to be able to join you and our friends all around the country for a bit of time together this afternoon. And I first just want to say that I hope that everyone, wherever you are, you're safe and healthy and well in the midst of what is undoubtedly an incredibly challenging time in our nation, and certainly a challenging time for educators and for their families and for our students. And so we feel really honored that we get to share a little bit about the journey we've been on together at Klein ISD. And by no means, I'll say at the very front end, we are forever learners in our district. So we are always striving for better and striving to improve. And so while we have learned some lessons that we're sharing with you all today, we are still very much on the journey, and so hope to benefit from the collaboration and the community that we're sharing this afternoon. So first, let me just tell you a little bit about where Klein ISD is to give you some context for our school district. We are located in Northwest Harris County. Harris County is the largest county in the state of Texas, and in Klein ISD, within our boundaries, we have just over 240,000 people who live here. It's about 88 square miles for our district. And I will say that I am proud to call Klein ISD my home. My husband and I have two children who both attend Klein ISD schools. And so I get to experience, I tell people all the time, I have an ongoing focus group at my house that is always willing to give me feedback on how things are going in the school district, both from the parent perspective and from the student perspective. So that is an added bonus of getting to live in the place where I'm so fortunate to serve as superintendent. But in the district, we have just over 54,000 students this year across that threshold. We've been a fast growth school district for a number of years. We're going to be actually opening up our 33rd elementary school this fall, and we have 10 intermediate schools, 5 comprehensive high schools. We also have a high school program of choice called Vistas, and then an early childhood pre-K center, and lots of great programs in the district to meet the needs of our students. But we continue to grow, and currently, this is what our demographic breakdown looks like. We tell people that we are very fortunate to serve every student in our district, and both Maria and I will touch more on that in a moment, but we break down like this in terms of demographics, economically disadvantaged status, English learners, and students receiving special education services. And we actually in Klein ISD look a lot like the state of Texas. So you can consider us a representative sample of what's going on in the great state of Texas right here in Klein ISD. But most importantly, in our district, we have a shared vision that in our district, every student enters with a promise and exits with a purpose. And that's something that we work hard to make sure are not just words on a page or words in our buildings, but are things that a vision that we actually live out together as we strive to make sure that every student in our care is well taken care of, and eventually leaves us fulfilling the purpose for their life that brings them tremendous joy and honors their unique gifts and talents and strengths. And so within that shared vision, we have a strategic framework that drives and centers all of our efforts in the school district. We have 3 strategic priorities: reimagine learning, which I can certainly say we are doing to the hilt these days. We are reimagining all sorts of things as we strive to educate our kids, cultivate talent, and then specifically for our conversation today, build community. And we, from the beginning, when we identified this as a key priority for the district, called out that we want to make sure that we are engaging, educating, and equipping our families. And so Maria is going to share a little bit of the journey we've been on related to that in just a moment. But I also will just celebrate that there's over 1,000 school districts in the state of Texas. And as the proud superintendent of Klein ISD, I will say I'm very proud that the collective work that our folks have done over the years has resulted in us being one of only 3 districts in the state to be recognized by the Texas Education Agency as a model family engagement district. And so, as I said on the front end, that by no means means that we're perfect or that we have all the things figured out, but it does mean that this is something we invest a lot of time and energy in every day, but certainly, as we will share today, are continuing to invest in as we respond to the COVID-19 crisis. So that's a little bit about us in Klein ISD from what you can see in the slide deck, but I'll tell you what makes Klein ISD such a special place to call home and a wonderful place to raise your family and to educate your children are the things you can't see on a slide deck. And that's all the countless people in what we call our Klein family who work so hard to bring that shared vision to life. And certainly we have an outstanding group of educators. And I will say you all are in for a real treat today, because Maria is one of the finest educators I've ever had the privilege of serving alongside. She is the kind of person who gets up in the morning and makes you want to just continue to do everything within your power to serve every student and to care for every family. And so I'm going to pass it off to Maria now and let her share with you a bit about what we've been learning in these recent days.
Thank you, Dr. McGowan, and thank you, Dr. Constantino. Again, it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you today. It's a joy to get to share what we do every day in Klein ISD, and hopefully today you will leave with more tools and more ideas that you can implement to improve and move forward your family engagement practice, because I think that if you're joining this webinar is because your real passion is with family engagement. Our goal today, we really want everybody to view family engagement as a strategy that you can effectively use to promote student learning. And I am very lucky to be in a district that takes family engagement, as you so very seriously, with Dr. McGowan leading us. And I always say, like, with this kind of leadership, you can only perform because it's what you have to do. But we want you to take some ideas. As she said, we know that we have things to improve. We are forever learners in Klein ISD. We want to do things better every day, but we definitely want to share with you what we have been doing so far in hopes that you can use it as well. I wanted to use this quote by Dr. McGowan in one of her addresses to the Klein community. During this crisis, she said, "At home learning is not homeschooling. At home learning is a response to a crisis." And I immediately adopted the quote because it really put into perspective what we were doing right now. There was so much pressure for everybody to perform, best intentions for everyone to serve students and families. But this crisis is also going to pass. It's going to go away. And what are we going to learn from this to improve for the upcoming times is what we want to also focus on while we serve families. As she said, we are part of one of our strategic priorities of building community in Klein ISD. When Dr. McGowan moved into Klein ISD as a Chief Learning Officer, one of the first things that she did was to move family engagement under College and Career Pathways Department. And I usually see people kind of puzzled when I said that. College and Career Pathways Department is the department in Klein ISD that takes care of the whole learner. So we have different departments within, including counseling, fine arts, advanced academics, CTE, student data. And her strategic move promoted that family engagement was embedded across our organization. I think that truly changed the landscape for family engagement. We were able to collaborate more. We were doing it before, but now we were collaborating more with different departments to truly bring family engagement into everything that we do. And I think that was one of the really good things that this visionary leader has done for us, among many others. I also wanted to start with this quote by Dr. Constantino. It made me think a lot about what we have been doing in Klein. Families that were disengaged before are not more engaged now because learning is taking place at home. This engagement was never about attending events or meetings. Believing that relationships are essential is the first step. So I stopped for a minute. By any means, in Klein ISD, we do have events at the schools, and we do want our parents to come to our buildings and share and join us. We have our Parent University initiative that promotes that as well. But really, we in Klein are all about relationships and taking care of that first. And that, I think, that has given us during this crisis solid ground to start doing what we had to do during the pandemic.
Right. So you can all see now why we all love Maria so much. I mean, she's so passionate, and everything she does is so sincere about supporting our families. And definitely, I hadn't thought about that for a while, Maria, that moving family engagement into college and career pathways, which of course is a focus academically, as well as with the whole student, from when they enter with that promise to when they exit with a purpose, whatever that's going to look like in their college or career military readiness. We know that families need to journey alongside and be a valued part of the experience that students are having while they're in our care. So fortunate to have Maria leading that work alongside a very, very talented college and careers pathways team. So one of the things that we're committed to in the district is continuous improvement. And so we have lots of data points that we utilize to try to check in on how we're doing and advancing our work around these strategic priorities. And so 2 years ago, we really wanted to tap in on how are we doing with some of these things around building community, engaging, equipping, and educating our families. And this is something very simple that we started. I mean, there's all different ways today to generate surveys, but essentially when our students come back in their families are not re-enrolling, but verifying their enrollment in our district that they plan on returning for the next school year, or when our families are enrolling. A couple of years ago, we just started asking them at that strategic moment where they're doing something they have to do anyway in order to be able to make sure their students' classes are ready and prepared. We started using that opportunity to ask them some questions about how we were doing. And so we call this our family satisfaction survey. And last year, we were really excited in the fall. We had our largest return ever. We had over 20,000 families just answer these couple of questions as they were going through this normal part of getting ready for back to school. And so that's 20,000 families. Of course, many families have more than one student that we serve within that family, but very, very simple way to capture a really good snapshot of how we were doing. And so one piece of good news was we asked our families how satisfied they were with the education their children were receiving in our district, and about 84% of our families said they were highly satisfied with the education they were receiving in Klein ISD. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm a 100 out of 100, 10 out of 10 kind of person. And so we're going to keep pushing forward and continue working hard to that end. But that was some good feedback. And then they also let us know what's important to them. Because I think sometimes in districts and in schools, we have different ideas about what's important to us. But those things that may be important to us may not necessarily be connecting with the things that are priorities for our families. And so what they shared with us overwhelmingly was that the top 3 things they care about are safety, not surprisingly, in the world that we live in today. They care about having excellent academics for their children so that they can get a great education. And then they also gave us a lot of input about they want their children to have choices academically for that purpose. And so we call that pathways, but lots of different options for students to pursue whatever it is they're passionate about, whatever it is that's going to be their purpose later in life. And so by asking that question, that's helped us in terms of engagement with our families, really make sure that we're strategic in the things that we continue to invest time and energy in, because there's only so much time and there's only so much energy. And so we know these are the things that are important to our families, but it also helps us to strategically communicate in a world that's inundated with information around topics that are actually important and meaningful to the families that we serve. And then we asked them this year, what keeps you from being more involved in your child's education? Because we knew that not every family was yet fully engaged in their children's education. And so we wanted to know straight from our families, what keeps you from being involved? And so not surprisingly, the number one reason was work commitments. And that was like all over the spectrum in terms of feedback of whether they're working multiple jobs to try to put food on the table, or they have jobs that have huge time commitments or travel commitments. That was a common theme from our families. Also just other responsibilities in the home. We heard a lot about raising, multiple children and all the various activities that kids are involved in. And so being able to have the time and space to be able to be engaged in education when there's lots of competing priorities. And then again, the time, I think that's, educators would agree with that. There's just never enough time. And so since we learned that, it helps us to start thinking differently about the way that we provide experiences for families to engage in their children's education. And so we tried something new, which has been a huge blessing to us, given that we're now in COVID-19 times where you can't physically meet with families. You can't have everybody come to an auditorium or a cafeteria to have a big town hall meeting. We decided that we would try in the fall, based on that feedback from our families, to start reaching our families in their living rooms or on their phones or wherever it was that they were at the time, that we would do a Facebook Live. And so again, like, this is something that isn't super complicated to do. It's something that is a technology that probably a lot of folks have available to them, but it was wildly successful. And so you can see the stats there. Within the first 12 hours, we had, over 5,700 people, unique viewers, watch this. After 48 hours, we've gone up to over 6,400. And, I tell folks all the time, imagine the last time as a superintendent or a principal, you said, I want to invite everybody for a town hall meeting in the auditorium at the high school or in the cafeteria. Can you imagine having 6,400 people show up to that? And then just the logistical challenges that would present in and of itself. And so we felt like we were really onto something. Again, this was less than an hour. We shared some information. We let people ask questions in advance, so we knew specifically what they wanted to ask about. And then we also took questions live, which was great. We also did this 2 other times in the fall. One was specifically around the time where families have to help their kids choose their courses. That can be a really overwhelming, scary experience for families. And so having that Facebook Live was unbelievable. And then also right around the time where our kids were taking the SAT and PSAT. How do you get prepped for these college entrance exams if you're a first generation student and this has never been on something that you can ask mom or dad about, or if you're a parent and it's been a long time since you've taken these assessments, it was a great opportunity for them to learn. So fast forward to COVID-19 times, and Maria touched on this. We've been working hard not just to take care of the academic needs of our students and families, but also to take care of the whole student, the whole family. And that has included, as many notable educators and districts have done across the country, feeding families, making sure their physical needs are met. We've driven school buses into neighborhoods where we know people can't make it to curbside pickup, so that we can drop off lessons and food to families, because that's, again, in the spirit of trying to make sure that we can reach every single family and student in our care. And then I love this picture that our food service director put out the other day, where the kids are driving by and putting up signs saying, thank you so much for all of your hard work and the way that you're taking care of us. So I'll share this other effort that was very successful recently to try to feed our families based on our learning from the survey and the things that we had tried and experimented with in the fall. We did a Facebook Live recently that was just about COVID-19, and our chief of police joined us. Remember, our families told us that safety is very important to them, and so we have an outstanding chief of police who joined us. We also have an outstanding leader of all of our school nurses and health services in the district, which we knew would be important. So they joined me, and you can see the numbers there. We had, in the first 12 hours, almost 8,000 unique viewers. After 48 hours, it had gone up to over 11,500. And again, this was about meeting people. In this context, we couldn't actually have them come to the cafeteria or the auditorium, but we were really just drawing from experience and something that we had tried previously in based on the information that they had given us. So now, Maria, I know you're going to talk a little bit about how we've been trying to help support our educators and supporting our families as well.
Maria, before you start, I just want to make one comment. There's lots of questions in the chat room about your survey, and it looks like somebody from the district just posted that your Department of Research and Program Evaluation developed the survey internally, and you had a 40% response rate, and that you're willing to share the questions.
You bet.
Okay, well, we'll figure out a mechanism, folks, for those because many people are interested in that. We'll figure out a mechanism to get that information to you. Sorry, right. Maria, go ahead.
Oh, no, and that's what we do. It's collaborating. Everybody in Klein ISD. Family engagement is really family in Klein ISD. As Dr. McGowan said, we not only want to serve our families well, but we also want to strengthen the capacity and build the capacity of our staff to be able to serve our families. So we have a lot of professional development throughout the school year, and we really focus on promoting that capacity. But it is very important for us that our staff is prepared. And during this crisis, certainly, we had to do some adjustments and some modifications because we're going to have staff reaching out directly to families. We're going to have parent liaisons, which I have an amazing team of parent liaisons. They are all amazing, and I know some of them are watching, so a big shout out to them. We have our teachers, of course, our counselors, and our principals or assistant principals, everybody trying to reach out and touch base with our families, which is a fantastic thing. We have to be mindful, and we have to know that there are families that don't speak English, so we strive to provide interpretation and translation in every communication that goes out to them. A lot of support during virtual parent-teacher conferences. Now they are virtual. Now we get to chat through the screen, but we want to use every opportunity to reach out to that family. So what we did was we had before this crisis a family engagement site for the staff where we constantly put material for them to build their capacity on family engagement. We usually had it for our schools that are participating in our parent university cohort, and we decided to open it up to all of our staff, teachers, staff, and administrators, so they can get that information that they need, best practices, and how else could they reach out to them. I have been collaborating closely with the counseling department. The counselors have a very vital role right now in reaching out to families. And we have built some of special sites for special populations and, of course, for at-home learning. So I want to show you, this is how our at-home learning sites look like. These are for families. And this one over here that says resources is for families or special populations. So as you can see, this is not the job or the work of one person. It's like literally everybody in Klein ISD teaming up to make this happen. This is our family engagement Google site for staff. And what we did was we started populating, and I'm going to show you this document. We started creating a list with tips and resources that educators, families, principals, teachers can have at the tip of their finger, so they can reach out and put it in a newsletter, using it during a parent-teacher conference, during a phone conversation. Very practical. So my team worked on this collaboratively, and we told the district, like, if you have something that you want everybody to know, please send it to us and we will publish it right there. We also created a series of infographics, and based on the wonderful opportunity that I had to attend to the masterclass with Dr. Constantino and continue learning, I said this information is too valuable. How can we make it really concise and just like catchy for educators to look at it and see this is something that I can do? So we started creating this series of infographics that we publish internally in our Klein site for the entire staff, when we talk about key concepts on family engagement. So how to build partnerships, how to boost at-home family engagement, how to support family efficacy, what is invisible family engagement. And this is our most recent one that is about family academic socialization. So it's just giving, again, all the staff kind of those little tips and things that they can start thinking about to start incorporating in their practice. I think that one of the most powerful lessons during this crisis is that we have done a lot in reaching out to families and getting to know them and communicating with them. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are doing the same. And the stories that feed us are the stories that are going to keep us moving forward and keep continuing doing this. I shared a story with Dr. Constantino and Dr. McGowan yesterday of a teacher who reached out to a family. She didn't have the opportunity before to reach out and talk to that, and she did. And that dad told her, I want to help my student, but I am struggling with my own reading. What can you do? So she reached out to her principal. Her principal contacted me, and I had the opportunity to talk to the dad. And he said, I came to the country at 12 years old. I went into ESL. I did very well in school, very well in high school, and I went into college. But after my first year, I realized that my reading skills were not up there for college. And ever since then, I feel that I cannot help my student. So having the power to get into the home and to hear those stories and to be able to say, we may help you. These are some resources that you can use. Thank you for letting us know. Feeding the teacher with that information so she can adapt her teaching to the context of the home is one of the multiple lessons that we are learning through this crisis, and that we hope to learn from it and apply that learning for when this is over.
Well, thank you, Maria and Dr. McGown. We're getting a lot of questions, and so let me, if I can, ask you a couple of questions, and then I probably see me taking notes. Just a couple of things I wanted to go back to because I think they're important points that you made today. One of the questions was, someone asked, what is the Texas State Council for Family Engagement? Can you tell us a little bit about that organization, who runs it, and who's in it?
Do you want me to do it, Jenny?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, the Texas State Council on Family Engagement, a couple of years ago, we were very fortunate to be asked to join this wonderful cohort of 3 school districts in the state of Texas to support the Texas Education Agency in finding ways to support and promote the family engagement practice in Texas. So we work closely with Region 16 that houses our family engagement in the state of Texas, and shout out to them as well. And we bring parents. This is a council, and of course on family engagement, we have to have families with us. So each one of the 3 school districts bring families. And what we do is a collaboration, looking at best practices in other states, looking at what we currently have. Texas is a very wide, large state, and we have to be very mindful on putting out their practices that are reachable and attainable, and not that just because we implement probably in the city, we are expecting for everybody to do the same. So that's what we do in the council, and we have been very fortunate to be part of it.
Wonderful, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, you can see that both Maria and Dr. McGowan have, Maria's given you her email, and you have the Klein School District. So Maria, you may have 982 new friends emailing you, but we'll see if we can't help you out a little bit. So another question, to go back to the Facebook Live. There were 2 questions that I'm going to try to combine into one. One was, do you have any knowledge or have any advice for anybody on how to encourage the disengaged to attend the Facebook Live session? And it's probably hard to know who attended and who didn't. So there's this question about, would the disengaged population attend a Facebook session? And that may be your opinion or any facts you might have. And then secondly, someone asked about translation of Facebook Live. Were people who did not speak or understand English well, was there an opportunity for them to participate as well?
Sure. So we have an outstanding communications team in Klein ISD, and we have intentionally staffed our team to the best that we can to represent our community. So we have a Spanish speaker on our team. We have a Vietnamese speaker. We have a large Vietnamese population in a part of our district. And so we really make very thoughtful efforts to try to make sure all of our communications are translated. We also leverage some different forms of technology, and I can share some information with you after this. And if it's helpful to folks, we can let you know we've got different programs that translate into far more languages than just those 3, but those are the 3 primary, like English, Vietnamese, and Spanish, that we work hard to make sure all of our communication efforts are coordinated in. With regards to the disengaged, so the first thing I always try to think about personally, and then ask our team to think about, is what kind of assumptions are we bringing to the word disengaged? Because engagement, to me, really begins with empathy for the people that we serve. And so when I think about who might be disengaged and who sometimes educators feel are disengaged families. Sometimes we think it's families that have language barriers, families that are less resourced financially, but that may be true, but there are also other kinds of disengagement where we have families that are, as the survey results showed us, perhaps very well educated themselves, but have other barriers that prevent them from being connected to what's happening with their children's education. And so when we did the Facebook Live, what was really fascinating to us, in addition to just the sheer number and just the increase in the reach, although we certainly know that we did not reach everyone. And so, like I said, I'm a 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 kind of person. So we'll keep pushing hard to that. But a lot of the stories we heard from folks were actually from families who have never attended an in-person event because they find those events either very intimidating, very overwhelming, or just frankly impossible for their schedules and their circumstances. And so hearing from parents who said, this is the first time that I was able to get the information that I needed to support my child with course selection, even though, please keep in mind, we send home millions of things about this. We have all sorts of traditional avenues that we utilize to try to engage our families. We had so many families say, I don't feel comfortable in a cafeteria full of 500 people or 5 people raising my hand and asking a question about this in front of others. But I have no problem sitting behind my computer on my phone and asking questions that are then getting answered live during that moment. And we have a team of folks who also stay on after the Facebook Live to answer questions. And then we also provide a link. So if you aren't watching it live, you watch the recorded version later because that works better for your schedule. Our amazing communications team turns around and continues answering those questions after. So a lot of our joy from trying this new way of reaching people really came from the fact that we had so many families, of course, that come to everything and want to, attend anything they see on social media that could potentially help their children. And we're certainly grateful for those families. But we had so many families who said this was the first time I felt safe, and the first time what we were providing was accessible for them, for their lifestyle and their context. So again,
I appreciate that. One of the things we know about engaging families and the disengaged when we start to get into where does disengagement start, what started it, what caused it, why can we re-engage somebody who's disengaged? There's a lot of science and a lot of discussion, and hey, that might be a future webinar we can talk about. It might be interesting. The audience can let me know. But when you dig into the science of disengagement, you realize that a lot of what you just said is very, very real and very true for many families. They do not feel comfortable coming on the school property for a host of different reasons.
Right.
They're never coming to a meeting. They're never going to come to a math night. It doesn't mean they don't care about their children. It doesn't mean that they don't worry about their children. It doesn't mean that they don't want their children to exceed them in their quality of life. What it means is they're just not comfortable coming to the school. So the Facebook opportunity is an opportunity to engage from a place of comfort. I think that's important. And I think the other reason and this is my opinion, and I'm going to ask you what your opinion is, but long before the pandemic, parent voice was very important to your school district. Mm-hmm. The survey, the genuine desire to collect real information. And you said something earlier, you used the word meaningful. And what you also talked about empathy and engagement. What we also know engagement to be is something that's meaningful and relevant to someone else. If we want someone to engage with us, we have to have something that they care about, that's meaningful to them. And when we in schools and all of my friends, I might get in trouble for saying this, but we're really good at sending stuff home. My gosh, we inundate families because we want them to have the information. But what happens is that the more and more we do that, the less and less meaningful it becomes to people. Mm-hmm. And then they get to the point where they just don't read it. It becomes almost like Dear Occupant Mail. Mm-hmm. Why, Dr. McGown, why was family voice and the role of relationships and the role of families so important to you even before we found this COVID issue? Because it's unique to see this topic basically in the center of everything that you're doing. And there's a lens, everything that happens in Klein, from what I can see, goes through this family lens. Can you talk a little bit about how you got there and why that's important?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that we're cognizant of every day is that our students bring their families with them into whatever space that whatever classroom, whatever cafeteria, the second they walk through those school doors, when we were able to walk through school doors, they don't cut off all these connections that are paramount in shaping, sometimes hopefully for the best, sometimes not, but they don't have the luxury of abandoning their families when they come to school. And so there was, to think about, if we're going to care for the whole student and we're going to try to make sure that every student who we believe has promise within them, who has unique gifts and talents and abilities, to try to achieve that ambitious vision without the support of the family and without the acknowledgement that the role that families play and the impact that they have on our students' lives, on their experiences, on their frame and through their lens through which they see the entire world, we are potentially disregarding an incredibly valuable resource that can be a support in trying to do what we're all working hard to achieve together, which is help that student find their purpose and have a quality of life that is even above and beyond perhaps what their families are experiencing today. But also, not only are we abandoning and leaving a resource untapped that can help support them, we're also leaving a resource untapped that can help to support us as a community and us as a community of educators in particular. And so I think that that's the reason why we're just recognizing that students don't exist in a vacuum. They bring stories, they bring experiences, they bring people with them wherever they go. How can we honor that? How can we leverage that for their own benefit and also for the benefit of the community is the reason why we just continue to believe this is an essential unit for helping to achieve our shared vision.
Yeah, I think, when I have the privilege of working with schools around the country, we always talk about the culture of the organization and whether or not the culture believes in values and is accepting of family engagement. Your school district is an example of a school district that built a culture around something that was very important to them, and that is family engagement. And I suspect that the abrupt transition to COVID-19 was certainly difficult for everybody. But you were maybe just a toe or two ahead of the game because you had already built a pretty impressive network of communication and families and support and relationships. And this notion of family voice is central to everything you do. Everything that you shared, everything that you do had families helping to plan it, giving their opinion, meeting with 6,000 or 7,000 people. As a former superintendent, I now call myself a recovering superintendent. But to be able to meet and talk and listen to 6,000 people really is a testament to an attitude and a belief and a value system that you have squarely put in place in Klein. And so for that, I say bravo. Now, Maria, with all of that wonderful stuff, let me turn into the reporter and say, not everything can be wonderful.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about what are you experiencing now in terms of working with families? You talked a lot about what's working well. What things are you learning, and what struggles are you still having?
Well, yes, but as you know, we have said it before, we are forever learners in Klein ISD. So we are taking what we're learning right now and hopefully make it better for our families later. I think that as I believe a lot of our schools districts in the country, the access to technology was one of the first things that was in the mind of the leadership. And for that, they were able to put together a plan to reach out to and make sure that all the students, every student has access to technology. The fact, for example, that many teachers want to communicate with their families don't speak their language. So how are we going to do to help them troubleshoot that and make sure that they still build that relationship with the family, that they still have that connection with them, because it is very important. And as I said before, we're learning a lot of good stories of like, oh, I finally could connect with this parent, or the parent saying, thank you for calling, because we know that somebody cares. When you were talking about those connections, how are we going to improve those groups of parents that we have in some of our schools where we have parent liaisons that were there before and that have become like a true network of help for the families? And how are we going to transfer that to other campuses? So we learn from that experience, and we're going to transfer it to schools where we need to start creating those groups. A family voice is very important for us. In everything that we do in family engagement in Klein ISD, we want the opinion of the family. So as we walk through this crisis, we're listening. What do you need? What worked well? What cannot work? What else can we do better? And now a lot of parents asking, well, what is going to happen when we go back? So I think that keeping in mind that we need that feedback, but most importantly, do something with the feedback. Like, I am very adamant, not only with my team, but with everybody. Like, if we're asking something from families, we have to make sure that they see our response, not only just archive it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everybody in our listening audience should write down, do something with the feedback. That's probably, if you don't mind, Maria, I'm gonna steal that. I'll give you credit.
You may, of course.
But, so often we tell parents things that they're supposed to do or things that we'd like them to do, and we impress upon them how important it is. And then for whatever reason, they don't do it, which is feedback in itself. When we expect someone to attend something or participate in something and they say they will, but they don't, that's a form of feedback. For some reason, they didn't come. But very often we never follow up. We never say, we're sorry you didn't come, and we still want you to have this information. So I think that point about feedback is important. Dr. McGown, I'm looking at our chat room and looking at the school districts represented across the country, Canada, Australia. We have all different kinds of schools. Somebody asked about ISD. ISD means Independent School District, right? That's a Texas. Right. That's a term. Yes. And you are a public school. I think someone in the chat thinks that ISD meant something else. But the Klein School District is a public school district in Texas. And it's a large district. I know many of you come from very small districts, and you're trying to wrap your head around, my gosh, how did they do this with 55,000 people? Dr. McGown, I want to ask you, one of the controversies that's happening in the COVID, we're all trying to find the balance between the right amount of work and the way we should do this. And there have been some very public, I'm not sure exactly what to call this, but there have been some very public pushback from some families who have said, this is too much, or we can't do this, or we are overwhelmed. And in some cases, families said, my kid is not participating. We're done with this. Have you had any of that experience, or can you go back and talk a little bit about what your team's thinking was in terms of what were you going to tell your workforce about what to do, now that school buildings were locked and closed? That question, it's a lot of questions in there, but I guess the first part is some of the pushback that we do see, and if that's happening with you, and then to go backwards design and say, was there anything in the design of what you did that helped? I mean, I know you have good relationships with your families, but helped families understand what you were trying to do in terms of continuity of learning.
Absolutely. So yes, to answer your question, we did have, with 54,000 students in our care and their representative families, you can imagine that, first of all of those folks are in very different circumstances. And so one of the key messages that we've tried to share as a district is, like, let's let grace abound, right? Let's start from a place of grace and gratitude. Let's be appreciative of what families are able to do. Let's be appreciative of what students are able to do during this difficult time, because we've heard stories from some of our students. I heard from a student who reached out to me who said, I used to have a part-time job, and this part-time job is now a 16-hour a day job because both my parents have lost their jobs, and I'm trying to help put food on the table for my younger brothers and sisters. To And then to take that story and apply it to how they may or may not be engaging with our at-home learning platform, that context has a considerable impact on what they're able to do right now. And so what I try to encourage our folks, and we have so many talented leaders across our system who do the same thing, and what I try to remind even our teachers who are also at home, many of them trying to educate their own children while they're trying to teach their school children, their students, is to really just start from a place of your best in this situation is going to be enough. Like, we're going to ask for your best, and whatever that is, that's going to be enough. And it's also going to vary considerably based on the context that you're in. So with at-home learning, for example, we had some families who would reach out to me and to others and say, we need more. I need more. I'm trying to work from home, and I need my child to be fully engaged in something on that laptop for many, many hours every day so that I can do the things I need to be doing over here, And then we also had families who, as you mentioned, said, this is completely overwhelming. I'm not a teacher. I don't have the efficacy to be able to do this. And I'm just completely overwhelmed with this. And then we've, of course, had families where we've had to make very intentional efforts to keep reaching out to them because, multiple attempts, phone calls, emails, scheduling and setting up virtual classrooms, we weren't able to connect with them. And then we were concerned for their safety, their health, and their wellness. So, it has really run the gamut. And my response back to people has been, we're going to provide what we like to call a guaranteed and viable curriculum. It's the essentials of what students need to know to be prepared for future coursework. It's not the same thing as when they come to us and they're in our care multiple hours a day. It is not. It is trying to get those essential standards that they need to master available and accessible to all. And then from there, we just have to extend a lot of grace and a lot of care, recognizing that the context is not something we can control right now, and that context has a significant impact on students' learning. So yes, on the student end of things, we have definitely heard all of those things.
Great. And would you say, from your perspective as a superintendent, do you believe that learning will happen, but it's just slower? Are there expectations in Klein that learning is going to continue the way it did? Or did you as the superintendent, or did the team or principals say, we have to come up with an alternative plan because doing what we did when we were in school isn't going to work? Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about those expectations in terms of the speed of learning? Because I've been talking a lot about, I think it's going to slow down no matter what you try to do. You just can't keep the continuum and the momentum that you had when schools were open, and we should be okay with that. But so many people are getting palm sweaty over, oh my gosh, we're not getting to lesson 2.
Yes. And I look at all of that, and when I hear people getting so anxious about like, oh, we're getting behind, or that this is blowing the scope and sequence completely away, or, families saying like, oh gosh, my kid hasn't done every single lesson this week. My first response truly is empathy, because all of these people are coming to this moment with whatever tools and resources they have, trying to make it work in a world that we created overnight because we had to. And so I think you have to acknowledge that this is like to try to take what was and then just fit it the same thing in a completely different box. It's a different size, shape, has different texture challenges, you name it. It's just setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. I do think, and people are making colossal efforts across the world, certainly in Klein ISD. I could not be more proud or grateful for our teachers, our counselors, our principals, who are just trying to keep the focus on learning. But even in spite of those colossal efforts, there are going to be things that we simply are not able to address in this context, or address at the pace that perhaps we could address it previously when we were actually in our own school buildings. And so I think if you keep trying to cling to these things that were and try to get that square peg in that round hole called COVID-19, you're going to continue to experience a lot of unnecessary pain and frustration. I think there's just got to be an acknowledgement that this is unprecedented, and everyone is going to do the best they can with the resources they have in this moment.
So thank you. Texas, of course, now is a state. Do I have it correct? It's one of the states now that has just shut schools down for the remainder of the school year.
Correct.
Has your state does your state step in? And one of the other big issues that is going on that I know somebody will want to know about is grading. And some states have stepped in and said there are no grades. Wherever we ended on March, something is your grade. But some states are doing something different, and some states don't get involved and they leave it to the district. Can you talk briefly about how you've asked your teachers to handle grading? Assessment is probably another conversation, but just the notion of our students learning.
Sure. So in Texas, grading is a local decision. So it is left to the discretion of the school district to determine, and that's not just in this crisis, but every other day of the year, we set our own local grading policies that we all adhere to. So our philosophy on grading during COVID-19 is really coming from the philosophy that we have about grading in general, which is grading is supposed to be feedback on what a student has mastered.
There's that word again.
Yes. We get caught up in a lot of things when it comes to grading. We get really locked in on numbers and the GPA game, and there's a lot of systems that kind of force some of that pressure that are outside of the local control of the school district. However, in its purest form, grading is supposed to be feedback on what a student has mastered or not yet mastered. And so from that foundation, and we wrestled with this, and I know a lot of my colleagues and surrounding districts that I'm blessed to collaborate with, we had lots of conversations about how are we going to handle grading during this COVID-19 crisis. And ultimately, one of the big things that we all kept landing on, and we certainly landed on in Klein ISD, is I'll go back to my story about my student who is now working a part-time job, has now become more than a full-time job, and they're trying to put food on the table to keep their lights running and their water bill paid. To really try to take the old grading policy and apply it to a student in this context isn't right. It's just not right. And so what we've tried to focus on is how can we give families and students feedback on what they're learning. Again, we've slimmed it down to the essential skills that they need to master in this last quarter in order to be prepared for future coursework, future grade levels. And in slimming that down, how are we giving we ask for weekly feedback on how students are doing in mastering those concepts. And we've also said, we're not going to let anything that happens in this grading period hurt students. So we're not going to let the kid who's working around the clock be hurt by this. So what we've said is if your third marking period grade is higher than your fourth marking period grade, your third marking period grade will count in place of your fourth marking period grade. So we've tried to be very student and family focused, and again, with a lot of empathy for the wide range of circumstances our students find themselves in and our families find themselves in, adjust our grading traditions to really hone in on providing meaningful feedback.
Yeah. I want to try to get in two more questions. We just have a few minutes, a couple of questions that I see. One for you, Dr. McGown. Somebody asked about laptops or tablets. Does every student in Klein have one, or did you try to figure out a way to get technology to kids who needed it?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate in Klein ISD. We were one of the first districts in the nation, I believe, to go to a one-to-one environment. That was over a decade ago in the district. At first, it was just for our high school students. And then in recent years, we've expanded that to all of our junior high or intermediate students. So all secondary students have a device that's issued to them as part of their regular education experience. And that's because of the overwhelming support of our community, supporting numerous bond referendums. And so we're certainly grateful for that. Our elementary students and families, however, did not have that. They don't have that as part of their normal experience. And so hats off to our IT team who in a matter of days deployed thousands of devices through curbside pickup to our families at the elementary level so that we could get them access. And so that was a huge feat. But yes, that was something that we prioritized as an enabling condition for the rest of at-home learning in Klein.
Great, thank you. Maria, one last question to you. You have a lot of fans who are very jealous of the fact that you have this superintendent who you seem to have direct access to. And
She's amazing.
Maria is amazing.
Be careful now. I think you have a whole new fan club. One of the questions though was, what are you doing? And we only have about a minute or two, and we can continue this on Twitter. By the way, everybody, we're going to continue a conversation on Twitter right after this is over, and you can use the hashtag Real Family Engagement. Hashtag Real Family Engagement. If we don't get to the question in the webinar, we'll certainly try to get to the question in the Twitter chat if you can join us, and we certainly welcome you. The question, though, Maria, is what are you doing to support parent involvement specialists now? What, you shared some things, but are there a couple of other things that you might share that because you have, did you say 40?
No, I have parent liaisons, we call them in our district. I have 12. And they serve our schools in Klein Forest Family Schools, that is our schools that receive Title I funding. What I'm doing is I am meeting with them constantly, individual meetings. We also have a virtual team meeting as well. Let me tell you, those ladies are amazing, and they are the ones who put me to work, because they are the ones who really take the pulse of that community. And that's what I have been experiencing in growth in this COVID crisis, how teachers reach out and said, we are noticing this, we are noticing that. So our parent liaisons take the pulse of that community, and they keep me on my toes looking for resources for families. And we are experiencing now our teachers and administrators are as well reaching out, and we work for them. So we have to hear from them again. We can put out there a million things, but if we don't know what our families need, we are really working. It's worthless what we do for them. So
Sure. Well, thank you both for sharing your story. There's so many people in the chat room that are very thankful for you taking the time and sharing your successes and your challenges. And you've given us a lot to think about. You've given us a lot of really great ideas, and we really do appreciate that. We'd love to come back sometime. There's still so much more we could talk about in terms of the teacher's role and leadership roles and all kinds of things. But we'll try to continue a little bit with some questions on the Twitter chat right after the webinar. Hashtag Real Family Engagement. Want to thank our guests from the Klein Independent School District in Texas. And I want to thank all of you for joining us as well. Next Tuesday, our webinar will focus on communication. We have a communication expert, Patricia Weisenthal, who will talk with us about the words that we're using and the way we're communicating, and some ideas and suggestions about communication with families and students during COVID-19. The following Tuesday, on May 12th, we will be joined by Dr. Adam Saenz. Dr. Saenz is a social-emotional learning expert, a psychologist. Much of what Dr. McGown and Maria talked about today, a lot of it has to do with meeting the emotional and social needs of families. So we're very happy that in 2 weeks we will have an expert with us, and we'll talk both about the social emotional needs and the academic needs of students and families, and how we might continue to navigate this through the end of the school year, and then, who knows after that. So to our guests, thank you very much. To everyone who is on our chat and who will listen to it out there, if you signed up for this webinar, you will get an email, and in that email will be a recording of this webinar that you can watch again or share. You'll get a PDF of the presentation that our friends from Klein shared with you today. And you'll also be able to download a certificate of participation for the time that you spent in the webinar. Look for that email in the next 24 to 48 hours that comes directly from us. We're out of time. We're a little bit over time. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you, Dr. McGowan. Thank you, Maria. And we hope to see you all on Twitter here in just a minute. Bye, everybody.
Take care.